We are now beginning the Odyssey by Homer, and this is a sequel to the Iliad, which concludes. Um, the Iliad concludes in the 10th year of the war. If you remember, as we finished reading, we did not necessarily get the conclusion of the war because the Iliad is only about the wrath of Achilles and satisfying that wrath. But just to bring you up to speed a bit, the war does end. Of course, Troy does fall, and everyone goes on their way home back to their land. Most everybody gets back home within the year following the fall of Troy at the end of the Trojan War. However, the character of Odysseus, one of the most well known and best of the Greek warriors, his journey is a little more taxing because it's going to take him yet another 10 years to get home. And like the Iliad, the Odyssey begins in medias res, which is in the middle of things. So as we jump into the Odyssey, we are actually almost at the end of Odysseus's journey. However, we go back through the telling of events and we get the behind story or the backstory that are going to be in the first 7, 8 years of Odysseus's journey of him trying to get home. So all in all, Odysseus is away from Ithaca, his home, for about 20 years. He left the year that his son was born, and so by the time that he makes it back home, his son is almost completely grown, a full man. As the book opens, there are many additional characters. Some are the same from the Iliad, and then some are new. We get Poseidon, who is the god of the sea, and he is going to be the enemy of Odysseus throughout the entire book, and we will find out why. And then, as in the Iliad, we have Zeus, who is the king of the gods. Athena, who is, if you remember, Zeus's daughter, she is the goddess of wisdom, and she is basically acting like the patron saint of Odysseus. She is Odysseus's guardian and watches out for him, as well as Telemachus and his home of Ithaca. If you see that she is referred to as Athene or Pallas Athena or Pallas Athene, that is all the same person. Telemachus is Odysseus's son, and when we meet him, he is about 18, 19, almost 20 years old. However, if you remember, Odysseus, as I said earlier, when he first leaves to go to war, Telemachus was just born. Odysseus's wife is Penelope, the mother of Telemachus. And then there are also two of the suitors that we meet, Antinous and Eurymachus, and they are going to be causing much angst and anxiety for Odysseus's wife Penelope. And then there is Euryclea, who is the nursemaid to Odysseus, and she was also the wife of Odysseus's father Laertes. She was his second wife. His mother Anticlea, almost like Euryclea but different, was Odysseus's mother and Laertes' first wife. However, when he did marry Euryclea, in order not to keep his relationship with his first wife completely exclusive, he did not have any sexual relationships with Euryclea, but she had the status of a wife. Which gave her a more prominent place in society, and in lieu of a husband-wife sexual relationship with Laertes, she was more of the mother figure to Odysseus, and then she is that same nursemaid or mother figure to Telemachus, Odysseus's son. So it's almost as if Laertes, the father, had one wife, but it was split into two different subcategories. One who was the actual mother and sexual partner, and then one who was the person who was in charge of the household and the child rearing. In the beginning, as in all of the epic novels, or epic poems rather, there is an invocation to the Muse. And this is a beseeching on behalf of the author to give aid to complete the entire story. Everything, all of the stories up to this time, up to Homer's time, were given in the oral tradition, and so everything had to be remembered. And so even though this was written down, which was one of the things that Homer was became so famous, in order for it to be written down there, it was typical of the author to call upon the help of the goddesses in order to help him complete the story. And then we get the summary of prior events since the story takes place in the middle of things. We get the story of the wanderings of all of the men who come home, the death of his friends, where he is on Calypso's Isle, and then why Poseidon is going to seek his revenge upon Odysseus. And it is because that he has blinded his Cyclops son. And then, as stated earlier, the story begins in the middle of things. And one of the major things to look for and major themes upon which you can base the brunt of this story is the comparison of fates. And Homer is very quick to point this out, and he's going to do this through Athena. And there is this comparison of the fates of two great warriors, Odysseus and Agamemnon, but also comparing the family units, because there is Odysseus, his wife Penelope, and his son Telemachus, and then Agamemnon, his wife Clytemnestra, and their son Orestes. If you look at the first family unit of Odysseus and Penelope and Telemachus, you have Penelope, who is an extremely faithful wife. She does not deviate from her marriage vow. She has a son that is seeking out his long lost father and cares for both of his parents very much. So this is the what is representative of the archetypal Greek family, your heroic family, because everybody is doing exactly what they're supposed to do. And that is also going into leading upon this theme of fidelity versus infidelity. You have Penelope, who is fidelitous to her husband Odysseus, but in contrast to that, there is Agamemnon's wife Clytemnestra, who is not fidelitous to her husband. While Agamemnon is off fighting the Trojan War for 10 years, his wife Clytemnestra has an affair with Aegisthus. And then when Agamemnon finally makes it back after 10 years of the war, Clytemnestra decides that she is not ready to end her adulterous affair with her lover, and she and Aegisthus plot and kill Agamemnon. When that happens, Orestes, the son, becomes angered and then turns and kills Clytemnestra and Aegisthus. So the only one that is left is the son of Agamemnon and Clytemnestra. So if you are contrasting both of these family units, you can see very clearly that one is more successful than the other. So there are the themes of the fidelity versus infidelity, and also just the viewing the wives, and not just the wives, but also the sons and the actions and of the family units as a whole. So that is something to keep in mind. There is another theme that is very prominent within this poem, and that is that of disguised identity. And that can somewhat be coupled with the idea of deception. Deception is typically viewed with a negative connotation. However, that is not always the case. Sometimes deception can be done for safety reasons, and that is basically the case of many of the instances in this book, especially with Athena. There is this theme of identity, which leads into revelation, typically serves a purpose. We have Athena, who has disguised herself in this book as Mentis, and it was given to encourage Telemachus. This theory is based upon a theory suggested by Richard Lattimore in the introduction of his translation of the Odyssey, which is another very prominent translation. We are using the Fagles version, but the Lattimore is also one, and it is one that he has created and posited in order to just follow through with this idea and the importance of keeping one's identity sealed for the safety of others. And that we are also going to see that when we later view Odysseus coming home to Ithaca and seeing the suitors, and he is going to keep his identity disguised. And then the revelation is very purposeful later on. New characters in Book 2. We have Mentor, the aged protector of Odysseus's property, and then Halitherses, a prophetic Ithacan who predicts Odysseus's homecoming. In book 2, there is an assembly that has been called, and this is the first time since Odysseus's absence, and this is done by Telemachus. And so remember, when Odysseus first leaves for the war, Telemachus is a baby, but as we are encountering him now, he has grown almost to a man, and in an effort to try to find his father, he is going to call an assembly to see what he should do, and he is going to come up against a lot of rebuttal on behalf of the suitors who have been encamped at his house and are trying to take his mother's hand in marriage. And he has decided that he must take action against these suitors. There is also Penelope, who is weaving this shroud, and this is another idea of that is supporting this theme of deception. And then this is something for you to think about: this guilt, innocence, or cleverness on behalf of Penelope. But the point is she has told all of the suitors that is she is going to weave this shroud, and it is basically like a cape or a shawl, and so it would to weave something, it would be very time consuming and very labor intensive, and so the idea is basically once she completes it, then she will choose someone to marry, but in order to keep that from happening, she undoes all of the work that she does for that day. So in essence, the shroud will never be finished. But in the meantime, if the suitors are going to stay at her house, if they are going to encamp upon her land, she is going to drain them dry, suck them for everything they're worth. Because if they are willing to take from her, then she is going to be willing to take from them materialistically, because they are going to give her gifts for her. For them staying on her property. And so in order to do this, she's going to stockpile, and it's basically creating a small treasure trove for Odysseus, because when he returns, because she has this perpetual hope that he will return. And so that is something for you as the reader to think about. Is she guilty of deception? Is she innocent because she's trying to defend her homestead? Or is this just a clever act that basically follows right in line with the kind of wife that Odysseus would have?